The information found in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hi, and welcome to the Women in Depth podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lourdes Viado. Join me as we explore the inner lives of women, their struggles, fears, hopes, and dreams. We'll go beneath the surface and take a deeper look at what is hidden, unknown, uncertain, and uncomfortable. Hi, and welcome back to the podcast. Really excited about my guest today. Her name is Maya Benattar, and I've known Maya professionally in various Facebook and therapist groups, and I've always been intrigued because the type of work she does has to do with music therapy. And this has always just fascinated me, and it makes sense that music can be therapeutic. So I have looked forward to having her on the podcast. And finally today, the stars have aligned with our schedules. And I'm fortunate to have her here to talk about this. Maya is a music therapist and psychotherapist in private practice in New York City and online throughout New York State. She specializes in helping women who are ready to work through trauma, stuckness, and long-held anxiety. In addition to her clinical work, Maya offers online and in-person Reclaim Your Rhythm workshops for helpers and healers, and is a frequent presenter and speaker at conferences and trainings. Maya received her master's from New York University and has completed extensive postgraduate training in vocal psychotherapy, creative arts therapies in trauma treatment, and music and imagery. She has over a decade of diverse clinical experience in medical, educational, community, and private practice settings. Maya believes that women deserve to be loud, messy, sensitive, angry, shy, and so much more. Now is the time for you to reclaim your rhythm. Hi, Maya, and welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I am very excited because, as I mentioned in the intro, I've always been intrigued about your work, and it made sense, but I'd never actually heard of or seen anyone actually offering music therapy. So thank you so much for being here to talk about this.
My pleasure. Always glad to chat about my work.
I want to start with just finding out, how did you end up as a music therapist? Like, what happened? Because it's very different, you know?
Yeah, no, totally. I get it. Music has always been a really big part of my life. And I actually will often share the story that I was actually named after a song. So it kind of feels somewhat inevitable that I would end up doing this kind of work. And bonus points to any listeners who happen to know the obscure Israeli song that I was named after. Yeah. And so that was sort of the framing for me. And I grew up in a really musical family, all of that stuff. And the short answer is that when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to major in college, I tossed around a lot of ideas, mostly in the helping professions. My mother is a social worker, so I certainly considered that. I considered becoming a teacher, a lot of like related helping professions. And I stumbled upon music therapy. I was 16 or 17. I was doing an AOL search and I somehow stumbled upon music therapy, and I had like an aha moment of like, oh, this is what I want to do. And it just felt so clear. So I actually went to SUNY New Paltz. For any of you who are in the Northeast area, I went to SUNY New Paltz for undergrad, specifically for their music therapy program. And then I went on to NYU for grad school, also in music therapy. And it's just, this has been my work and my life really since I was 17, which feels crazy to ponder.
So what is music therapy? I mean, I have an idea, but I'm sure that there's so much more to it than my idea. I just know that for me, there are certain types of music that really help me to feel relaxed. And so I notice when I'm, maybe feeling more stressed or overwhelmed, I choose a certain type of music to really help me to feel good, to feel better.
Totally. Yeah. And I would love to talk about like the different types of music that work for different moments and how the intentionality of that and how we're all so different. But if music therapy, the field, is not about how we may find music to be therapeutic. I think we all do in some sense. Music therapy as a field and as a profession is the specific use of music-based interventions within a therapeutic relationship to meet certain therapeutic goals. That's like my abridged version of the AMTA, the American Music Therapy Association's definition. So music therapists work with a huge range of people, of ages, of needs, all the way from babies in the NICU to people who are on hospice and actively dying and everything in between. So oftentimes people hear about music therapy in the context of kids with autism, people with mental health challenges. There's certain areas that music therapy tends to kind of pop up. So that's my kind of broad overview, my advocacy hat, if you will. There are, I think at last count, somewhere north, I believe, of like 5,000 board certified music therapists in the United States. My number might be a little outdated. I think that's somewhere around 5,000 to 6,000. So it's definitely a field that's been growing in recent years, but it's still quite small comparatively.
Can you give me an example of maybe how you would work with a woman who comes in with anxiety?
Yeah. So I love the getting specific. My overall definition is general because it is such a big field, and what someone might do with a baby, in a NICU is totally different than what you might do with someone with dementia or anything like that. So yeah, let me speak specifically about my work. The way that I work is really body-based, is really eclectic and relationship-focused. And so within the field of music therapy, there are also so many different, I feel like this is important to mention. I am trying to get to the answer to your question.
No, take your time. This is great.
There are so many different theoretical orientations that inform people's, the way that people work, even within this one field, this umbrella of music therapy. There are music therapists who work from a more CBT sort of framework, more cognitive behavioral. There are music therapists who work from a more improvisatory kind of model, or more activity-based, or more psychodynamic and relational. And just like in talk psychotherapy, that all of these different theoretical models and influences of those who came before us influence how music therapists work. So I'm also a psychotherapist. I'm a licensed creative arts therapist in New York State. And so I work primarily from a psychodynamic model, which means I'm really influenced by not only how people show up in the moment, but how the stories of how they were as children, the stories of the people who came before them, sort of the generational piece, how that influences how they show up in the moment. And being a trauma therapist means I'm always really paying attention to trauma histories, as well as pieces of stories that are told and those that are untold, those that are carried in the body. Very much influenced by Bessel van der Kolk's work, as well as a lot of other great trauma therapists. So when I work with a woman with anxiety, there isn't one way that a session looks. So it's so individual. And so sometimes it's a little challenging for me to give an overview. But the way that music shows up is really individual. We might talk. I often talk with clients, but I often am pausing them to sort of help them notice, if you will, the musicality of their speech. So my sort of tagline is reclaim your rhythm. And essentially, when women are feeling stuck because of their anxiety or trauma histories, there's a disconnection from these core rhythms. And so often that shows up in feeling out of their window of tolerance, feeling dysregulated. And so I usually begin by bringing some gentle attention to, like, what's happening when you talk about this? What do you notice in your body? What do you notice in your breath? What would it be like to slow down or to get grounded? So a lot of that, like body-based somatic work.
Yeah.
The way the music shows up, sometimes it means we pause on a specific feeling and we move to improvising, so creating music in the moment that reflects a certain feeling or place of stuckness or idea. Sometimes it means we use recorded music and music and imagery techniques to stay with a specific feeling, to deepen a relationship to a positive feeling state, or to learn more about a place where there's tension. And so allowing music to hold these different qualities. Sometimes it means music-assisted relaxation, so allowing music to deepen the experience of being in a mindful state of learning how to let the body and the breath soften and relax in a safe way while the music that I create in the moment can hold that for people.
And so you're using instruments in your office to create music then?
Yes, my office is full of a lot of beautiful instruments. There's a piano, there's a guitar, there's all sorts of percussive and melodic, different xylophones and bells and all kinds of stuff. So those are often, and I'm thinking of my office with a little bit of a pang right now because we're recording this during the pandemic and I haven't actually been in my office in, 5 months.
Yeah, I've been the same.
Yeah, I've been at home. I've shifted my entire practice to video like so many other therapists. And so I'm missing my office and the space that I created and the space that just the visual of the beauty of the instruments. And I also have scarves and animals and art supplies. And it's just a very tactile, creative sort of space. I've done my best to replicate that at home. So I have like a little table behind where I sit to do sessions that has some instruments on it. I use a lot of like color and scarves and body movements like I do in the office and a lot of recorded music. Fortunately, that part hasn't changed. But yeah, there's always the option in the office for clients to play, which is a really sometimes inviting thing for women. Yeah. Sometimes it's scary or unknown, and that gives us a lot of really fertile space to explore. For a woman with anxiety, the idea of not being able to control or predict can be really frightening, right? But that's a lot of the work around anxiety is, can I let myself be wrong, quote unquote? Can I not be perfect? Can I let go just a little? And so we use the music and our relationship to explore that.
This is really, first, it just makes so much sense. When you were saying how music really helped to reflect or to demonstrate how we can be stuck or where the places are in our psyche where there's inner conflict, or even like I was thinking about that if I was in your office and you asked me to play something, I think the first thing I would think is, well, I don't know how, that would, which I think, like you said, there's so much richness in that this idea that, well, I can't play if I don't know how, right? It's just,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I was also thinking that this must help people to really express or connect with aspects of themselves that maybe might be harder or if not even impossible to get there with just talk therapy.
Yeah, I work with a lot of clients who've been in talk therapy. I also work with a lot of clients who've never been in therapy, so I'm their first experience of it, which is always exciting. But I think that there's so much value to words, and I'm a very sort of word-based person myself, ironically.
Yeah.
But words only can go so far. We can stay, and anxiety, we often stay in this very cognitive sort of spinny place, I often call it. Yeah. And music is an invitation to deepen and to go back into the body, which may or may not be comfortable, right? This is about this process of titration, of going slowly, of checking in, particularly for people who have trauma histories. So it's not about like, okay, you're here in the office, like, let's play, let's do this. And some people are totally, they're able to just move into that. And I realize I'm making a gesture right now with my hands that of course you can't see, but sort of this like energetic, like we move into this. And for some people that's really overwhelming. And so I have some clients where it might take them months to play an instrument. Maybe it's about just listening to me play, listening to me improvise, and the not knowing is not knowing what or how I'm going to play. So to be able to be with not knowing in that way. But for a lot of women, for a lot of people, but I work primarily with women, the not knowing is so hard. We get programmed to know, to be the one that holds that. I think in our families, in our lives, in our work, that we're the ones who know. And if we don't know, then it's a problem that we have to figure out often.
Do you find, because, with working with primarily women, because I've noticed this with my clients, which are primarily women, that there can be difficulty in in knowing how to relax or how to play.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but yes.
Yes. Yeah. There's a default or or a comfort in doing and working and being productive. But then when it comes to relaxing, being, playing, it's very unfamiliar, scary.
Yeah, totally. I think for a lot of adults, we stop playing at some point in like late childhood, right? We switch into this mode of doing, right? Of being productive, I say this from experience, like that was a lot of my experience. I was, a kid who like wandered in the woods and like tried to build my own treehouse, which did not go well. And at some point, high school, college, I stopped playing as much. And so to come back to that in my own life has been so joyful and so difficult sometimes. It's really tricky to allow that space, to give that permission, right? For so many women, playing is not what you do. There's no space for it. I mean, I think this speaks to a larger sort of societal thing, and I could go on and on and on, but that there isn't space,
No.
there isn't permission to play. And music it can be play.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not. I was actually, so my main instrument is voice, and I was classically trained, and there is really no play in classical voice. Like I was trained and I was good at it. I was trained to like stand up and sing my Italian arias and, these beautiful opera pieces, and I enjoyed it, but there really wasn't any play in that. There was a right and a wrong. And so I had to learn how to improvise musically. And when I went to grad school at NYU, the program is very much based in improvisatory methods. And that was a huge learning curve for me. I think at that point I had improvised maybe twice in my life before that musically. So to be able to pick up an instrument and sit with a group of people and that was part of our training, was to be able to sort of work that out, to sit with the not knowing, to discuss what got evoked, right? What roles were getting sort of touched on, what tendencies sort of historically came into the room. That's the work of therapy, really, is to sort of to notice in music therapy, to notice who we are in the music, how we are in the music. Do we want that to shift? Is there a space for an opening? What part? I'd work a lot with parts with clients. What part is sort of taking charge, right? Is it the doer part? Is it the active part? Can that part kind of take a back seat, so to speak? Can a playful part come out? Is the playful part accessible, right? Like widening that access point to that playful part, or to any part that we just don't have as much access to.
Yeah, I love parts work for working with, again, it helps to access, to connect with, to begin to, I guess, recognize and learn about these aspects of ourselves. And I think when you are able to think of those parts, aspects of yourself as parts, it really is so helpful in beginning to, I guess, make something that seems a little bit vague and ambiguous or abstract real and relational.
Yeah, totally. And what I love about parts work with the work that I do is that we often will make it tangible as well, right? Like, and this is part of what I miss about being in the office with clients is, I might gesture to someone like, can you find I have like a box full of like scarves and like animal puppets, but also like figures. And I'll ask them like, can you find something that represents this anxious part or this angry part or whatever the part is? So to have it there with us in this tactile, real sense, and for both of us to be in relation to this part that now has form and shape. And sometimes it's a stone, sometimes it's a oil pastel. Like it doesn't have to be an actual figure, but it allows so much this opportunity for like a relationship to this actual tactile object, right? And then we might play with like, do you want it to be farther from you, closer to you? What do you want to offer to this part of yourself? Checking in on the relational aspect of how they're relating to this part. They might be really mad at it. They might feel badly for it. They may want to offer it some softness, like whatever that might be. So we can work with all of that in the creative process as well. It's so enlivening.
Your work sounds so exciting and so also deep at the same time. And also practical. I love that because for me, it's always been important. I'm trained, or my foundation is in Jungian psychology or depth psychology. And I've always wanted to be able to make the abstract real, and to take these concepts and give my clients something practical. And I love that you do that with your work. It's powerful. So I love the title that you have for your workshops. And also, I think this is a great way to think about how we are with ourselves and our flow and our connection and reclaiming your rhythm. What a great descriptor.
Thank you. I stumbled upon it. It stumbled its way to me, either one. But thank you.
And so this tagline, this phrase, reclaim your rhythm, really describes what I think it captures well what you're trying to do with your clients, right? Getting back into alignment with yourself.
Yeah, and it's interesting because initially when the phrase came to me a couple of years ago, it was really centered on the workshops, which I've offered online and live in person with helpers and healers. And it took me a little while, I can't remember exactly how long, before I was like, wait a minute. Like there was one of those light bulb moments of like, this is actually the clinical work that I do as well. And it's kind of like a duh, okay. But now that I've had that moment, it does feel like you said, it describes the clinical work so well.
Yeah.
And that reclaiming can be this like big and bold process, but also this like gentle tending, and that there's space for both. And I think that also speaks to the breadth of the clinical work as well, because sometimes when there's the need for like bigness, and music can hold all of this, like this like bigness and boldness in whatever that feeling is, right? Whether it's excitement or anger or whatever, or there's a need for this like quiet, I'm making like a cupping motion with my hands right now, like holding a part or holding a feeling in this like really gentle baby bird sort of way. And that reclaiming, actually the definition of reclaiming actually holds space for both of those options.
Maya, you're inspiring me with my work. I'm so excited about the work you're doing, truly.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So this kind of leads to my next question. What has surprised you most about the work that you do?
That's a great question. The clinical work, the workshops, all of it?
All of it. What has surprised you? Or another way I could rephrase that too is what inspires you?
That's a great question. I feel like there isn't just one way to answer it. The past couple of years, as I've kept honing like who I work with, who I really enjoy working with, what inspires me is so much of how my clients show up for this work. And how for some people, getting to a space, an internal and relational space where they can play is so freaking hard. Like, I think play gets tossed around as like, oh, it's this beautiful thing and adults need to play and children need to play. And sometimes we don't give as much space to like, it's really challenging for people for any number of reasons. And so I'm always in awe of my clients when they can let themselves really play, or when they can step outside of their comfort zone in any number of ways, and just to have some of those moments in sessions where, and this happens even via video, where we just look at each other like, wow, holy crap. And I mean, sometimes I'll actually say like, holy crap out loud, because that's just how I talk. I was trying to think of a different phrase. I'm like, no, that's actually how I talk.
Yes. I want you to be real here. That's great.
Yeah. So those moments where it's just, the work can be so difficult, but it can be so, so magical as well. And it doesn't always happen. It's not like every session is magic, right? Like, I think we might have that expectation. I might have that expectation sometimes, like clients might have it, but it's in being in that process together in that relational space that there are moments of just like, wow, holy crap, that was huge. Yeah. And then being able to hold on to those symbolically, energetically, and creatively, and then to come back to them, because that's often the hardest thing, is like, how is there a thread
Yeah.
And so when my clients have those wins of like, they bring something back. And the neat thing about telehealth and seeing my clients in their own homes is sometimes they'll literally bring an object back week to week, something
great.
that they found that like symbolizes it in some way, which is so cool. I really love that. And they get to sort of really live with the work they're doing in a way that they don't when they walk into my office for an hour a week and then walk out. So it's neat.
Maya, I wanted to circle back to something you mentioned when we first started the interview, and you talked about the different types of music that can be used or applied to different situations. Can you share more about that? And, also for our listeners, this is something that Maya and I are going to go into in more depth in another episode.
Yeah, I love to talk about music listening because I think that is the most accessible way that people have to explore some of this piece on their own if they're not working with a music therapist. So a broad overview is that music listening, I believe, can't be a prescriptive thing. Like, the whole take two Mozart and call me in the morning old joke, which is a terrible joke. But that's a great example. Like some people may love Mozart. Some people may absolutely hate Mozart. So saying like classical, there was a big craze actually around Mozart, I want to say in the 90s, around Mozart specific, Mozart for the mind. And around Mozart, like helping people be better at math and focus better. And I personally cannot listen to Mozart if I'm trying to write. Like it's a little too intricate for me. There's too many layers and too much movement going on. That's just me, right? For some people, Mozart may help them do any number of things. And so that's just an example of what works for one person does not work for another. So I never make assumptions. I often ask clients to share their music with me. And I will never say like, this piece will help you relax, because honestly, that's kind of bullshit. I love it. Well, it is, but people come with these preconceived. I can give an example actually to kind of drive this point home. We get these preconceived ideas. We get these explicit sometimes ideas about like, this should help you relax, right? Just like meditation should help, but quote unquote. And the shoulds put a lot of pressure on people, right? Like meditation can help, but for some people is really not helpful. For some people, they need to tweak it. For some people, it's perfect, whatever perfect means. Years ago, I worked with a client who, when we started working together, was saying, I really want to listen to some music between our sessions. And I really want to keep working on reducing my anxiety and all this stuff. And I've been listening to, I think it was a peaceful piano station on Spotify. And it really doesn't help, but I really feel like it should because it's called Peaceful Piano. And so I pulled up, I like pulled it up we were sitting together in the office and I pulled it up on my phone, which is plugged into the speakers. And I said, well, let's listen to something. And I said, well, what do you notice? Like, and we spent a fair amount of time like listening to the qualities of the music. And my opinion, and this is just my opinion, and I invite listeners to like pull up that station. I'm pretty sure it's still a very popular station on Spotify. It's lovely piano music. It's very like kind of spa-like and gentle, but it goes on and on. Like there isn't a clear beginning or an ending, really. Like one piece kind of leads into another. And so sometimes in anxiety, we need like a really firm container. We need something to hold on to, right? We think about like how anxiety manifests in the body. Sometimes we really need to feel grounded. We need a release. We need that like catharsis. And so this client and I began exploring all different kinds of music. I was like, let's throw this out the window. It doesn't need to be peaceful. It doesn't need to be classical. Let's just try some stuff. And we ended up with, this took, I think, most of the session, but it was so invigorating and enlivening to like kind of throw these preconceived ideas out the window. And what we ended up with was Beyonce's Girls Run the World.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Which is like as far from the peaceful piano station as you can probably get. And we got really curious about like, what is it about this song that's helping, right? Like, what is it that's helping you feel grounded and a little less anxious? And there's like a really good bass line in there and the energy is really good. And so there was, and that moment, and I often say like on that moment in that day, that worked for her.
Yeah.
Right. And to know that we're always different in every moment. And so a song that might help one day may not be that helpful the next. So I always encourage clients to make playlists and not lean too heavily on like one specific song. And I do that myself. But that's a story that I love sharing because I think it's a really great illustration of like what we think should help us music listening wise may or may not work. And for some people, peaceful piano station might totally be the ticket, and I'm not knocking that at all. I think that's awesome. But for other people, you might need something different.
Maya, I really love this practice of sitting with the music and really listening to it and paying attention to what it is in the music and what it evokes and looking for the information there. I just thought that was so powerful. It made me think about, certain types of music that I listen to at certain times and why is it at this time or in these situations am I drawn to this type of music? What a great question. I love that.
The question of what do I need is such an important one. And it's so hard for so many people. And that's something I often work on with clients because they might not know what the hell they need, right? Mm-hmm. Like it may be that there was never any space for that question in their lives, that no one ever asked or cared, or it didn't matter.
That is so true.
And so I've had clients be like, I have no idea what I need. You tell me what I need. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Like I don't pretend to be an expert with my clients, and certainly not an expert of like, oh, I know this kind of music is what you need. Like I'll offer options, I'll offer reflection, but in many ways, I don't consider myself an expert. I have a lot of knowledge, I have a lot of experience, and I can speak from that space, but it doesn't mean that I know what people need. And it's okay if they don't know. And that's something that we figure out together. We offer, like I have ways to sort of work with that not knowing, but that's another really exciting moment when I have a client be like, oh, I need something calming. I need something invigorating, because if they can know what they need with me, even if it's just quote unquote the music, if they can notice that need, feel that need, speak that need, then over time that translates to being able to do that outside of session, which is really what we want. Yeah.
I totally agree with you that answering the question of what do I need or what do I want is just such a big question, and one where the answers aren't easily accessed or revealed. So I love that. I can see how music can really help someone to find their way to that.
Yeah.
Maya, thank you so much for your time today. I am so excited about this episode and sharing it with the world and, continuing our conversation and going a little deeper into the types of music. If someone's listening and they want to get in touch with you, learn more about your work, what's the best way for them to find you?
My website is really the best and simplest way, and it's just mayabenattar.com.
And we will have that in the show notes so that they can find you easily. And again, I am so grateful for this time. You have invigorated me and inspired me, and I love when that happens. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks so much for listening to the Women in Depth podcast. I hope it brings you a deeper understanding of yourself and others, and that you found some insights that illuminated and inspired. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting Women in Depth with a one-time or recurring donation. Any amount is appreciated and helps us continue to provide free, quality content for the world. If donating resonates with you, you can find the donation link on today's show notes. You can also follow Women in Depth on Facebook and YouTube, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe on iTunes. Again, thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.